Today, we talked about a crisis of faith. A singer from the band Hawk Nelson recently came out and talked about how he fell out of faith or he had a crisis of faith. And so we just dove into that topic. Online joined in. It was wonderful. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hello. Welcome to Discussions with Jordan. You are watching it. Right off the bat, I just want to say thank you. For real. If there wasn't people watching it, then we wouldn't be doing it. And I thoroughly enjoy doing this. So thank you for sharing and watching. It means a lot. Today's guest has been seen on Shiloh sermons and podcasts and transition videos. Mr. Jordan Weaver. Thank you. Thank you. Jordan, we are a couple minutes late. And so I was like, oh man. And then we started. And so now we're going.
I feel like I'm up to date.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Hey, thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
I swear, it's becoming like a highlight of my week.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here as well.
You're welcome. I get paid to be.
Okay, well, the topic today. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
A crisis of faith. So,
Okay.
I don't follow news really, but it was brought to my attention that there was somebody who, today, the lead singer of a Christian rock band and son of pastor announced that he no longer believes in God.
I'm actually familiar with that story. Yeah.
John Steinfeld.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay. From the band Hawk Nelson.
Can we just call him Hawk Nelson, or is that
Let's call him Hawk Nelson.
Mr. Hawk Nelson?
Personally, it would be easier for me to remember if it was Hawk Nelson.
The other bandmates are like, we didn't say it.
We've seen this before in celebrity Christian culture, but it also happens to average people. So what are the steps a young person can take to their own faith independent from their parents' faith? So for instance, how do we get away from that's just how it's always been, right, to then taking ownership over our faith and pursuing our own journey?
I almost wonder if I'm going to take this out and put it on the table.
Yeah, do it.
Sorry for everybody. That's gross. I almost wonder if it's a generational aspect, because I think there's something about maybe our parents, but certainly our grandparents' generation that just sort of went along with the expectation, the social expectation. Like if you said, this is God, this is what he expects, do it forever until you're dead.
Right.
That would be a very hard sell today. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't always been that way. It seems like people are just more geared to take information on its face. And, we've got this whole development of fake news in the last 4 or 5 years. We're almost being trained to doubt everything. Mm-hmm. Information is so readily available. Truth is all of a sudden become so scarce. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if what this kid was going through today, what we're talking about. Like I said, I looked into it actually today, but I wonder if what he's going through isn't more indicative of a generation than an individual, if that makes sense. And so, one of the things that we try to do here, that I hope we do here, and I'd be curious, how many people are watching right now? 26?
26.
There's 26 people right now that have taken time out of their day to tune in and at least observe, right? On Sundays, I know there are people that are observing. And one of the things I hope people always get here is, first of all, you're loved anywhere in the process, whether you're for us or against us, whether you believe, whether you don't believe. That's one of our stated core values is, we're not trying to go rally up people who think like we do or believe like we do. And something I heard him say today was the social pressure or the family pressure to believe a certain way. Yeah. And this is the crazy part. It's almost like he had given up his faith as a freedom to ask the questions. Does that make sense? I had to give up on God so that I was able to ask these questions. And how cool would it be to get to a place where you can go, I don't want to give up on my faith, but I do have these questions. Where is the field? What's the theater for unpacking that at a time where I don't want to depart? Because this guy today, he even said, I don't want to give up on the concept of a God. I could see myself believing in a concept of God, just not the one I was taught. Right. Where in the Christian faith, where is the court, the basketball court where the game is played? Where is the football field where the game is played? Where is the Christian field for us to ask those questions? in a pursuit of truth. Because like I said, we're swarmed with information,
Right.
but it's like we doubt every single thing to the point that truth becomes so relative and so lost and so hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. I pulled some quotes from his post because I was thinking, I mean, what better way to dive into this than
Sure.
to literally dive into it? We've asked this question before, but if God is a loving, powerful God, why is there evil in the world? Can he not do anything about it? Is there evil in the world as a result of his desire to give us free will?
Well, and that's okay. So before I even get to the answer, because we talked about that a little bit last week of like this, the scope of suffering is always measured against the value of humanity.
Right.
To say that suffering is unjust has to go along with God's scale of human value, because if not for God, there's no such thing as suffering.
Right.
There just is existence, and there's things that we prefer, or things that we think would be humanly fair or unfair, but cosmically fair or unfair has to be measured against a scale that's supernatural.
Right.
Or sovereign. So before you can even ask the question, why is there suffering, you almost have to come to terms with the sovereignty of God. And to establish the sovereignty of God establishes his will that goes beyond what we understand, and that everything that we're doing is a simulation in a sense. Like this life is a simulation. The eternity has been set. There will come a day where this is like a memory. Like think about third grade, a class that you hated in third grade. It was real suffering in the moment. How many times do you think of it right now?
Right.
Imagine that times immeasurable. But again, it's almost more important to say, where's the safe place to discuss that? Where do you go right now to intellectually sort of like stretch and go, why? What is going on here? And so I wish that people that are going through what he's going through knew there was a safe place to examine that without feeling like they had to shed off a belief in God in order to ask it.
Yeah. Another one that stood out to me is why does God seem pissed off in the Old Testament, but a loving father in the New Testament?
Right. And what do you do with the verse that says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever,
Right.
and that Jesus was God?
Yeah.
You know, that what you see in Jesus, it's not like that Jesus is the cool one, God is the angry one. That's the mind bender, or the complexity of the Trinity, is that Jesus was fully God and fully man, and that God the Father is represented in Jesus. But yet you got Jesus saying, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased." Like,
Right.
it gets really murky fast.
Yeah.
But and we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast, is that he was clearing the runway for humanity to land. He was clearing a space so that Jesus, because what happens if Jesus was just born into a Philistine village somewhere, just a nameless, faceless kid? No matter what he said, there's nobody writing it down. There's nobody taking record of it, and it disappears off the face of the earth. We never hear about it. So the truth of who Jesus was, that is validated through the scriptures, God is protecting his people and his lineage. You know, and so what you see about God pushing people away from the landing strip so the anti-venom can land for the snake bite,
Right.
all changes in the New Testament. And then Jesus is here, and he's inviting people in because he's here. He's done it. His sacrifice was for us. And that he didn't come to teach us how to do it. We weren't saved by what Jesus said. We were saved by what Jesus did.
Right.
And so the nature of God changes the moment Jesus arrives safely here.
Right.
And at the same time, you still see God protecting the story of Jesus as a child until he becomes an adult. But that's why the nature of Jesus was so easy to understand as being loving in the New Testament was he's here. It's done.
Well, and what do we do when we're trying to decide, do I have a crisis of faith, or is it honestly asking questions to dive deeper into your faith? So for example, if you don't love going to church, if you don't love reading your Bible and you feel like it's an obligation, what does that say?
Okay. Imagine if I told you, Jacob, when you get to heaven, two things. Let's do two parts. Part A, imagine when you get to heaven, all that heaven is you worshiping at the feet of Jesus. That's it. At the throne. You're worshiping God at the throne. That's it.
Right.
What would you do with that? I mean, it obviously seems boring and like, that's it. What about when you get tired of that kind of stuff? Like, fair enough. It's a question, a crisis of faith, so to speak. But the second part of that is, what if I said that God was so good that nothing could be more fulfilling than if it was that? That if everything else that we know to be pleasurable or desirable or worth pursuing, what if we said that who God is could sustain more even than that. And you would go, that just is hard. It's a hard concept of God to understand. I mean, I would say that. Like, to me, if you were to tell me that's all heaven is, there's the knee jerk of like, ugh. But what that also does indicate is that there's more of God than what I understand right now. That ultimately, until I have seen enough of who God is, that I can experience him at that level of like, God, I just want to be in your presence. I just want to be close to who you are, the nature of who you are. If I'm reading the Bible because I have a personal agenda that I want to see fulfilled, I will get tired of reading the Bible. If I'm going to church because I'm checking the list off the rules or the boxes, then how could you not get tired of it? So that to me is that mental exercise of like, if I don't like going to church, if I don't like reading my Bible, why? Is there a part of God's nature that I find? Because sometimes I read the Bible and I can't put it down. There are other times I pick it up and I'm like, but never when I find that deeper revelation of God, do I ever feel unsatisfied by that. Like I have at the breakthrough and I'm like, more, I want more of that.
Right.
And it's actually that discipline that draws me back in times where it's a drought or it's dry. Like, I don't want to read the Bible. It's those moments of breakthrough that draw me back in, not the rules of reading the Bible. It's my experience with Jesus. And I'm like, I remember what that was. And that's what draws me back into the disciplines of it.
Do you have breakthroughs often, or if you're finding yourself?
It's seasonal.
Yeah.
It seems like when the first breakthrough happens, more breakthroughs are easy.
Interesting.
And then in seasons of drought, it's like, man, that's why, to me, I think that's why podcasts have been so helpful, is I can look up titles and topics and like force feed it to myself through my headphones. I don't have to stop and be disciplined to stop and look down. I've never been diagnosed with ADD, and I don't think that I'm medically, I don't know if I have it or not. I just know I have a really hard time sitting down and reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Because I was told that's what it meant to be a Christian, is to sit in your chair and you get your coffee and you post it on Instagram, or else you're not, you know.
Exactly.
It's always been hard. It's always been a struggle. But to ingest what is there, I don't have a problem with that. So it's, if somebody says I have a hard time sitting down and manually reading my Bible because my mind is racing, so I can figure out a medium or a method to
figure out how to learn.
Yeah, because what do you do in a drought? Like they say that one of the problems of being dehydrated is that eventually you stop feeling thirsty. You know, if you're going to die of hypothermia, you eventually stop feeling cold.
Right.
You know, spiritually, the most drastic times in your life, you feel the least attracted to it. So in moments where like, I don't want to do this, this is actually the indicator that that's when you need it, you know, the most.
Right. Anthony asked, last week you recommended God-Shaped Brain. I'm halfway through it and really enjoy it. What should I read next?
There's a couple that I'm in the middle of right now, but one, actually Brandon Grindle is the one that suggested this to me, but it's called A Perfect You.
Yeah.
Caroline
Leaf, is it?
Caroline Leaf. Yep. And I haven't, actually, what's funny is I haven't finished that one yet. I have to put it down and keep going back to it. And I put it down and keep going back to it.
It's thick.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say right now, spiritually speaking, Caroline Leaf, that's been a good one.
Good. If it's too deep, just, you know, give me a cue to ignore it. But I mean, have you had a crisis of faith?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anybody that has been raised in a Christian family as a child will. Yeah. Because eventually you have to shed off your parents' beliefs in everything. Yeah. You have to eventually examine it for yourself in everything. One of the things our nation does really well is it cultivates individuality really well. But what it doesn't always do is it doesn't always cultivate community. And so I think sometimes that when we grow up with a community belief, because we're so individually driven, we do start asking, what does that mean for me specifically? And so much of the word is community minded that you're going to run into sort of some flat spots in your tires every now and then of like, wait a minute, I've always accepted this. I remember the first few times I got learning that my parents, the first time I hearing about something that I knew my parents had been wrong about, it just blows the door open. I'm like, well, what else? Yeah. Because you're raised believing that everything your parents tell you is right. And so to re-examine a faith and really dig in, how could you have a relationship with Jesus apart from that? Because otherwise you're just doing it to please your family or to go through some rituals or whatever, rules or practices for what's the word? Sort of a self-elevation. Right. So if you don't have a drought or a crisis of faith, wait, because it's coming. Right. Like I think people that come to Jesus as an adult, maybe they've got habits that are bad or established, you know, like maybe toxic patterns and stuff like that in their life, but it doesn't seem like they go through that same way. Like you got a specific challenge being raised in a Christian home that you wouldn't have, not better or worse. I'm not saying that, just different.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to dive into the crisis of faith to then come out stronger. So like I've known people where you know, they're asking questions and stuff, and it's almost like the concept of that's just how it's always been. It's almost like you're hiding from the crisis of faith.
Well, and that's okay. So that's such a good point, because if God is who the Bible tells us that he is, and we run into things that cause doubt, there's nothing bad or toxic to discover in those questions.
Right.
The only way that you wouldn't want to dig in is if you're afraid that at the end of the day, your faith is going to be rocked and God's going to be proven wrong.
Right.
Anytime somebody pulls away from questions like, does God hate this group of people? Does God hate that group of people? The answer is no, nope, he doesn't. How do you know that he doesn't? Well, what do I say to that? Right. I don't believe that he does, but have I ever asked the question for myself? Have I ever dug into the answer for myself? Because what if I discover that God is bigoted and he is racist and he is sexist? What if I find that out? Oh, that would change everything, and I don't want to find that out. Right. Instead of going like, I don't believe that's who he is, so I'm going to dig in there because I want to find who he is at the bottom of these questions.
Right.
And what you find is a deeper revelation of Jesus that becomes more personal. Like it's this transition from rules and rote. You know, like as a kid, there's things I can't explain to my kids right now.
Right.
I can't. Like, how do you explain to a 2-year-old that the dog can't drive to school?
Right.
Yeah. Where you just have, like, it has to be, to some degree, it has to be rules in the beginning.
Sure.
But as they progress, there is this rational explanation, and I think I could go way into the weeds with that, but I think people have to ask themselves the hard questions, and they have to pursue it. And my encouragement would be that there are people like us that have gone through that have found this deeper revelation of Jesus. And that's why I think what I do or what we do here is important.
Right.
You know, we're not just do this or just say that, and the dog can't drive because the dog just can't drive, don't ask.
Sure. What if you find yourself falling or scared of falling into a crisis of faith, and you feel unstable and you're scared? What would you suggest? What should you do?
I think this goes back to what I'm saying about we really promote individuality in this country.
Right.
And the problem with individuality is that we can get away from lessons learned by our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. We have to learn everything ourselves. I think, who was it that said, who's the guy that wrote Huckleberry Finn?
Oh, somebody Google it.
Anyway, he said this. He said, to learn by experience only requires 2 lifetimes.
Right.
So
I've heard that.
You can't just live by experience. You've got to have information. You got to have people that you trust. You've got to have people that you can lean into. And I think that's why it's so important to have people.
Mark Twain.
Twin.
Mark Twain. I looked at it. Just
Mark Twain. But that's why it's important to have people that'll speak life into you. That's why it's important to have a community of believers. That's why churches, in my opinion, matter so much. Right. Is it's a safe place to unpack that with other people who are willing to ask a question, because otherwise the crisis of faith is, do I even believe in God or not? It also, to be fair, it also does open the door to a lot of information that if you're not willing to open-mindedly ask questions, there's probably some liability to it depending on who you're surrounding yourself with.
Sure.
Because if I'm the only person that's considering God as an option in my group, then I'm having to hear, okay, hard stop. If I'm the only person in my group who has a relationship with Jesus, and then I begin to have a crisis of faith, then I'm also the only person in my group who can defend my faith with the people in my circle.
Right.
So that puts me at a liability. So to have people that represent both sides of it to sort of work through this, and that to me is where the word becomes so important, is that I'm digging further into what God has said about himself rather than what my friends are saying about the world.
Right.
I don't feel like that's very clear, but
he said something that I remember, but I can't quote directly, but he said one of the reasons he didn't like the Christian culture was because he was afraid of speaking out. You know, or speaking out, but afraid of admitting that he's struggling because of financial reasons, meaning he needed to take care of his family and so on. And so if he said something, it would
jeopardize his income.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons he doesn't like the Christian culture. So is it a leap of faith to almost say, don't live for the culture, live for, yourself, your Jesus, so on and so forth, to ask the questions and dive into it?
Again, and this isn't exactly the answer to your question, but I'll try to get there. I think that's why churches have to lead the charge in the questions. because it leaves you thinking the only way I can ask the question is to leave my church to go ask the world their opinion about God. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I see logically, I see the concern there. Like mm-hmm. you have to leave the people who teach about Jesus and teach the word. You have to leave that group to go to the world and get their opinion. Mm-hmm. And what if their opinion isn't based on the word? It's just based on their specific experiences. Back to the Mark Twain takes 2 lifetimes, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're out in the world and you realize, like, wait a minute, these people are as lost as I am. Mm-hmm. And so if the church can go, this is a safe place to examine that. And if at the end of what we understand the word to be, you decide to walk away, mm-hmm. I mean, there's a freedom in it anyway. Even if somebody goes, I don't want to ask the questions to my church, you're easy come, easy go. You're free to come, you're free to go, but at least know it's a safe place to examine it if you'd like to, that you can ask the questions. I think that's the reason, in my opinion, that's the reason the church model has to change nationally, right. Is that we have to take the people who are naturally gifted at teaching the word and express that at a digital level, widespread. You know, the Ravi Zacharias, the guy that just died, great Bible teacher. Timothy right. Keller, incredible Bible teacher. Even people like, and I disagree with him like at a personality level, just he's a good guy, but mm-hmm. every now and then you listen to people like Judah Smith, and even as kind of wild and crazy as that guy is, you'll find something in the word. There are Bible teachers, R.C. Sproul, things like that. Those people need a voice that is broadcast wider. And if we don't have that element, podcast, YouTube, digital, online, all that stuff, if we don't have that, you're limiting the Bible to being taught by people who maybe are just doing it exactly like you said, the guy who's like, I can't ask questions or I'm going to financially lose out. Like right. we are putting such a strain on people that weren't necessarily designed to be Bible teachers. Maybe they're really good administrators. They're really good shepherd type personalities. They're great at hospital visits. And we're forcing them to try to teach a Bible that they're not naturally gifted at teaching. Mm-hmm. So then a young person comes in with a question and the natural reaction is like, I don't have time to do this with you.
Interesting.
If you could promote, I've said it this way. I don't think that the world needs more churches, mm-hmm. and I think the world needs fewer churches, but with more locations. Mm-hmm. Take the people that God has really gifted to teach and allow them to teach in so many more platforms, but then empower the communities to love each other, to feed each other, to be a community the way that it was, so that when kids have questions, they're being taught what the Bible has to say. Right. If they want to compare that with outside the church, I would encourage that. I would encourage anybody to ask whatever questions you want. Yeah. At least be fair in your pursuit. That would be my encouragement. At least be fair. At least ask those kind of Bible questions to Bible teachers, not, gosh, and that's a harsh way to say it, but maybe not even pastors who aren't necessarily gifted at teaching. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
no,
I think
seriously.
And I think for this guy, that's where I'm like, maybe it's a genuine pursuit. And I felt like reading his letter today, I felt like he meant it.
Right. But
who did he go to? Was he looking for a way out or was he looking for a way in? And that's where, to me, I mean, that's the needle. Like when the Bible says it's impossible to please God without faith. Mm-hmm. Faith says, I'm persuaded, God. I mean, how many times have we said this? Like, God, I believe that you're good. In my heart, I believe that you are good and you're God, but what do I do with all this information? See, that's still faith. You're saying, I'm declaring, God, deep down, I believe that you're a good God, but what do I do with all this?
Right.
Instead of going, maybe I want out. Yeah. Maybe I'd really like to come out. So maybe I'm going to try to find an argument that I can combat.
Yeah. Well, you've said it before, that somebody said to you, or maybe it was a saying of, oh, my bird really loves me.
Yeah.
Well, if your bird loves you, open the window and then we'll find out.
Yeah. Is there a actual fair measurement of that statement? Is there a fair way to measure that statement? People love God. Even the Bible makes it really clear. Like, no, you don't love God. You love God in response to God loving you.
Right.
If you want to nerd out for a second, think of this. The Bible says we're born into a sin nature, right?
Okay.
And not as children, but like the age of accountability. We're born with a sin nature.
Right.
We weren't born as saved. I was born into sin. The Bible says born into sin. So if I was born into sin, how did I ever choose Jesus? Because that would mean that my sin nature chose Jesus. And you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem possible, right? I mean, if I'm ruled by sin in my default sinful setting, and I had to be saved, because otherwise, what did I have to be saved out of?
Right.
If I wasn't sinful, what did I need to be saved from? But how do you balance the account if you go, I was born into sin, but yet somehow I chose Jesus. So did my sin nature choose Jesus? No, that doesn't make sense. It means that Jesus had to come, have an encounter with us, put enough of himself in our awareness that allows us to cling to it and choose him, but he did it first. So we didn't even love God initially. It's because God loved us first. Mm-hmm. So the measurement of the bird, like, open the window, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's a valid measurement of like, I love God even if I question God, even if I'm frustrated with God, even if I'm wrestling with God, even if I'm looking more like Israel than I would like. Maybe I'm wrestling with God in something, but what I think will happen with this guy, if I had to guess, we'll see if it's genuine, if it's a genuine pursuit of the truth. Because like I said, swarmed with information, starved for the truth. In his honesty today, in that pursuit, he's going to have a moment far from God. He's going to have a moment where he walks completely away from God. He considers being done with God. But if his story is anything like mine, what he's going to find is that when he comes back to the reality of God, it's going to be a much different situation than the reality that he left. The rules, the requirements, the unanswered questions. Because, okay, if you're going to walk away from God because you have too many unanswered questions, go to science.
Okay.
Endless amount of unanswered questions.
Sure.
All the questions being answered can't be a requisite, or else we have no belief in anything. You're going to have unanswered questions no matter where you go. But at least when you come back, at least you've considered it and objectively said, why? Ultimately, where that leads on a genuine pursuit, in my opinion, where that generally leads is back to a Jesus that says, okay, now I don't understand and I don't get it, but yes, but that's it. Yes to you, questions other than that.
Right. Thinking back to when you did go through, a time, was there a realization that you can think back to that made you almost pick your head back up and look again?
Vividly. Because the initial concept of God was based in do this. It doesn't make sense to say it this way, but it was kind of the feeling of like God threw us out into the world, the deep end of the swimming pool.
Sure.
And if we swim right, he'll let us back on the ladder out of the pool.
Okay.
I made it. I did it.
Yeah.
But I kept failing. I kept drowning. And it was like, I would come back to God. Okay, this time, God, don't worry. I'm going to quit doing this. And I have, my list of things of what Christians aren't supposed to do. And I kept failing. Even though I genuinely wanted to live like a Christian, I couldn't. I was such a failure at being a well-behaved Christian in a family of what seemed to be pretty well-behaved Christians, and so my moment was, it was kind of a desperation. It's crazy. It's probably the most authentic moment, Jesus moment that I've ever had, and I didn't even recognize it as one. And I said, Pastor Jordan, I said, I'm not going to quit whatever. I went down my list. I'm like, these are all things, God, that I'm probably going to keep doing.
Sure.
And the only reason I'm saying that is not because I want to keep doing them, but, history dictates this is probably what you can expect.
Right.
But I'll spend time with you in the Word, and I will try to let you have full access to my life. And so instead of me packing in my successes and telling you all these good things that I did to earn or get back to the ladder out of the swimming pool, I'm just going to acknowledge like I'm going to sink. But my heart towards you is that you're good. That's it. That was it. I swear it was that moment where everything changed, because then I didn't have to go back in and go, God, I know I told you I wasn't going to do this anymore. I can walk in and go, well, I knew, kind of had to know this was coming, but at least I felt like I didn't have to earn the presence of God at that point, which turned out to be the foundation of my faith 10 years later.
What do you think he said to you?
Remember that part? That's my favorite verse in the Bible, when he says, Jesus asked the guy, his son was infirmed, and he asked the guy, he said, do you believe? And Jesus said, or the guy said to Jesus, he goes, yeah, I want to believe, but you're going to have to help my unbelief. That's not the amazing part. At least it was honest. He was honest. And that's kind of where I was like, God, I want to be a good Christian, but you got to know, like, I'm not at all. I'm not even kind of good. I'm the worst kind of bad, because I know that it's bad in the moment. Right. Like my conscience was so seared. But he goes, do you believe? And he goes, I want to believe, but help my unbelief. He goes, basically, can you fill in where I'm lacking? Can you come out into the pool and get me, because I'm not a very good swimmer? And Jesus said, absolutely. Like that to me was a salvation verse. Of all, it's still an emotional moment, because like in all the Bible, none of the Bible made sense or would work for me or would apply to me if that verse wasn't in there. If that verse hadn't been so clearly spelled out, the rest of the Bible wouldn't have worked, because it was him saying, can you still love me even though I don't live up to the standard? And Jesus saying, yeah. I mean, that's it. That's the foundation that goes, really? She's like, yeah, no, I didn't expect you to do it. I'll do it. I gave it. I lived the life you couldn't live. I kept all the promises that you kept breaking. I kept living up to all the laws that you kept failing. I did it, and I'll give you that.
Yeah.
On the cross, that's what the cross was about, was him giving us, that life that we couldn't earn. Well, so that means that this guy today, he could have gone to Jesus and be like, man, I want to believe in you, but I'm going to be honest. I'm facing what seems like a mountain of evidence against you. Could you help me? And Jesus, I'm like, yeah. Man, imagine if we could get a hold of that Jesus, because that's the Jesus that draws you into the word. That's the Jesus that draws you into community when it doesn't feel like you want to be around people. Like, this is in the sermon this week, so I don't want to give too much away, but like, anxiety never desires relationship. Anxiety desires isolation. So when the word draws us into community and all these things, like, that's what draws you into Jesus. The fact that Jesus was willing to say yes in the midst of all of your failure. That, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody is going through, if somebody's listening to this right now,
Okay.
and going through it, and their thought of who Jesus is, who church is just, you have to be the perfect human. You have to be unhuman, if you will.
Yeah.
Then what does Jesus call us? What does he want us to do? Meaning at the very basic thing.
Right.
If you can break it down to like a thing.
Granular. How much good behavior was going to be enough?
Right.
Walk through this with me, and I'm not trying to patronize you, but stick with me so I make sure I'm clarifying. How much good would Jesus have required? The only logical answer is all of it.
Right.
Well, I've already screwed that up.
Right. It's already a waste.
So can I ever make up for that? Can I ever make up for the mistakes I've already made if the expectation is perfection?
No.
What if I live for 1 million more years?
Still can't.
What if I live for 10 more eternities?
No.
I mean, there's no open door to earning it. The door is not open to us earning it. It has to literally be a reliance on God's goodness to overwhelm my failure. Mm-hmm. That's the only scale that makes any sense, because the scale is perfection, and I've already messed that up.
Right.
So what does God expect from me? He expects himself.
Right.
And my reliance on him instead of my reliance on self, leaning into him as my salvation instead of myself for my salvation. I'll never earn it. By allowing God to fill in the blanks for me, I'm admitting I was never going to be good enough. Therefore, he had to be that much better for me, right? And self-reliance goes, you don't have to be that good. I'll be pretty good, so you don't have to be as good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the balance of what it means to be a Jesus follower is the scale's already broken. The earning scale's already, I can't. It's already over. If you gave me 50 more lifetimes and I lived all of those perfectly, it still doesn't overwhelm the sin or the mistakes or the failures that I've already experienced. There is no undoing for myself.
So it's almost like, take this in context, but it's almost like give up.
Honestly, it's a death.
Yeah.
I mean, when the Bible talks about it's a death. It's a literal acceptance of death. I'm already dead. And what that does, it also allows you to live. Did we talk about this? The EMT that said that he's had experiences with people.
I don't think so on the podcast.
He shows up on site and people are imminently going to die, and they go, am I going to die? And when he says yes, he expects panic. But he goes, in his experience, it's a piece of like the ultimate unanswered question. How will I die? Here it is. I got it. And there's a piece. And my point is, like, you can have that peace now. Like, I'm already dead. I'm no longer living for myself. I'm now living fully in him because I gave up. I gave up on the idea that I could do it. We've been getting some long comments, and I haven't been able to read them. Mindy, I'm going to go back to those, but Mindy, this probably won't make sense. I wish I could have understood this when I was raising young children. I taught them all the rules and actions necessary to be a Christian and did not focus on the relationship piece like I wish I would have. It's so hard to understand grace when children are raised with the you need to make God happy by doing all the right things mentality. But I didn't understand unconditional love until my kids were much older. I wish I could do it all over. I know I can show them now, but those binds are hard to break. Oh man. As parents, there's no worse guilt in the world than being a parent.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate guilt. I mean, that's just, I'm going to look back on things like, I'm so sorry. Anytime we inflict pain, but you got to remember though, Mindy, those are God's children, and whatever shortcomings you have, keep in mind that guy that said, I want to believe to help my unbelief was asking on behalf of his child. He wasn't asking for anything for himself.
Yeah.
He was saying, for my children, can you please make up for all the mistakes I made? And Jesus was like, yeah, but at some point it's going to be between them and you. the child in Jesus. Like as parents, we have a certain element, but like our sidewalk ends where theirs continues.
Right.
At some point, it's their decision. And so no matter the mistakes or the things we wish we could undo, it's no different than going, God, I wish I was a perfect parent, but since I'm not, can you be the fill-in?
Yeah.
My parents introduced me to God. They didn't force me or even baptize me because they wanted it to be my choice. My heart was called to Shiloh Ranch to develop my relationship with God and grow my faith. I didn't believe for many reasons. I was too self-absorbed to worry about anyone other than myself. My life was in crisis then, not now. Faith breeds peace. Yes, Beth, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, she said it better than I could. Was there another one up there? I can't.
Scroll up, Levi.
Okay. Simplest answer I know to complex emotional question. Love requires the freedom to choose. Yes, it does. Freedom to choose requires choice to have consequences, results, or there's no real choice. Mankind's choices brought evil into existence. God didn't create it. Evil is not a crested thing. It's a corruption of a good thing. Yes, rust can exist apart from the previously good metal. Yes, great. That's a great point. God does have the power over evil. God does love us and care about suffering. He can and will someday do away with evil once and for all. His love is so patient, though God is patiently waiting to bring evil and suffering to an end. Scientifically speaking, if you're in a lab, we have ways. This is like a Reader's Digest when I was a kid. I remember reading that.
Okay.
Because I'm old. But in a lab, we have ways to measure heat.
Right.
But we don't have anything in modern science. We have nothing to measure cold. We either have the presence or the absence of heat.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So when you think of evil as, instead of it being an active thing, it's actually a lack of something. What evil is the lack of the presence of God. That what we can measure is how much of God is in a situation or not. It's not how cold is something, it's how much God is present or how much God is removed. And how far from God's presence we want to remove ourselves. That's how we would, the conventional world will call evil. How does God allow evil? By allowing freedom.
Right.
I mean, by allowing freedom, he opens the possibility to a separation from him that we choose. It's in that. I think it's in that Timothy Keller book where he says, control every decision someone in your life were to make for half an hour. Like find one person and everything you need to go pick that up. Okay, put that down. Don't go there. Don't say that. Don't do that. It robs love from the relationship. Love cannot flourish under compulsion or control.
Right.
Love has to operate in freedom. That's what freedom is. And in a marriage, any kind of control that I put on my wife limits the amount of love in that relationship. Whereas it's ultimate freedom. I'm choosing my wife. She is choosing me. We're free, but we choose each other. That's what a relationship in a marriage is. And that's what God taught a bride, that God has pursued us. God has loved us. He has redeemed us. He has sought us out. I mean, it's the whole concept of God redeeming us to himself, and that our choice back to him is absolutely the easy part, but it's that freedom. It is freedom to say no or freedom to say yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Are there some more questions at the bottom? I feel like I kind of naturally feel it starting to wrap up. I want to make sure we didn't skip any of the questions.
Yeah.
Are there any new? Levi's running over there real quick.
I mean, yeah, this was just kind of a quick hit thing.
That today was heavy though, because I felt
absolutely.
like he means it. I feel like he's searching, and the takeaway that I got from that was he felt like he had to set down his faith. Tyler Jacobs said, do you feel that a lot of fellow Christians are getting too caught up in politics? I don't even have to go into depth on that one. Yes. Yes, I do. I think we're naturally geared to look to authority for solutions. We're just looking to the wrong one.
Yeah. Well,
And you don't have to set down your faith to ask questions. That's not what faith is. Persuasion is like, I believe in the end. There's things in the middle I don't understand, or vice versa.
Yeah.
I believe math works.
Yeah.
I believe in math. I believe so much of what we understand in technology to be related to math. Right. Do I understand math? Pfft, so much of it I don't. But am I going to declare that math is flawed? Like intellectually, I can't declare math to be flawed just because there are things about it I don't get or understand.
Right. Well, I mean, that's it. It was just kind of that one topic, and we hit it. So
cool.
That was awesome.
Hey, I got to go take 6 more steers into the butcher right now.
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's crazy.
Perfect thing. Hey, thanks everybody. Okay, bye.